Good afternoon, evening, and morning, depending on wherever you are out there. Welcome back, or just welcome to, if it's your first time here to talk like that, a live podcast that I do from my cupboard here in the west of Toronto. Anyway, let's get through some very important business. First of all, I would like to tell you about an accent class that I will be hosting. Of course, if you are a Canadian actor or voiceover artist, then this is a must for you. This will tackle various things such as a lot of vowels, Canadian diphthongs that sometimes peep through to show that you're actually Canadian and not American, as well as things like vocal posture, tongue placement, and also lexical sets. That's different types of words containing the same vowel sound. And those are all categorized in different ways depending on which accent you have. So that is something that is happening on the 18th of January. I would like to introduce my guest who is waiting in the wings here. Um, Her name is Cheryl DeLuca, and she is a native of Toronto. She's a former nurse. She's studied acting all her life, and she got her start in community theater. These days, she can be seen mostly in film and television, and she has a background in computer technology, nursing, and on top of all of this, she has raised three children to adulthood. So, Cheryl DeLuca, welcome to Talk Like That. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, how are you?
I'm
Is it
good.
Colin getting in?
Well, I understand you had a few technical problems.
I did. It was just it was just I had to install Chrome because I usually use Safari. So
Right. Yeah, I'm actually, I'm using a Mac right now, and it gives me no end of problems. I usually use a PC, but
yeah.
I'm not going to get into all of that. It's pretty damn boring. That's not what people want to talk about. So let's talk more about you, Cheryl. So,
Okay.
yeah, so how are you these days? Let's get that out of the way. Get all the small talk out of the way first.
I'm actually very good. I know people have been finding COVID hard. I think on some level I have as well. I miss being able to do a lot of the stuff I do, travel, uh, seeing people in the flesh, watching theater, going to the movies, all those fun things. I mean, we can do it at home, but it's not quite the same experience. But I know I've been blessed in a lot of ways that I haven't had as bad as most, and I've been taking advantage of the extra time that I have to do other things. So it's been kind of a 50-50.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
good.
We've been up to. We'll talk about those in a little
Yeah.
while. But
Mhm.
first of all, tell us about how you got started in acting.
Oh my God. I've been into it since I was in high school, actually. I mean, I guess I always liked to perform even as a child. I was an only child, so I guess I was a lonely child. So even with my friends, we would always act out stories and whatever. But I really didn't find my footing in it until I got into high school and I was, taking the usual subjects, math and all of that. And I thought I was a year ahead because I was jumping grade levels in certain things. So electives, we were allowed to take a higher grade level if they didn't have a prerequisite. So I asked if I could take grade 10 drama when I was in grade 9. And from that point on, I was kind of hooked. So I would do plays when we had them in the school. And it was great because, like I said, I was an only child, but I was also in a lot of ways just one of those outcasty kind of kids, and this is kind of where I found my niche, I guess. I could be a part of a group of people who were probably equally as outcast as me. So it was a great experience in high school.
I
I love
understand, like a lot of people that I've spoken to, a lot of other actors have said that they're either only children or they are the third child. So I think so quite often I think what comes out of that is when they're the third child, they're like, hey, look, I'm over here, pay me attention. So I think it's a natural kind of progression from that.
yeah, and that actually it makes a lot of sense too. The younger one, because they're the last in line, is the one who gets the least amount of attention from mom. In my case, because or mom and dad. In my case, my parents were divorced when I was young. So, and my mom, in order to survive in that day and age, had to work two jobs, sometimes three, to pay the bills. And I spent a lot of time home alone, watching TV. Not so much movies and stuff, but what you could afford in the day. But yeah, watching TVs and reading books. I love to read. I was an avid reader as a child. And it's funny because later in life, it depends what you believe in spiritually, but later in life, I ran into a person who's into Reiki healing, and she basically said to me, "You raised yourself." And I hadn't told her anything about my life. And I went, "Yeah, I did actually." And uh, so my life existed in books and TV. So I guess maybe that's part of the reason I was very drawn to acting.
Okay, great. Now, another question I have is that you're actually of mixed heritage. You're part Mediterranean. Um, I, I, you can tell me more about that. I don't know what I know that means from somewhere near the
Yeah,
Mediterranean. Um,
yeah,
Anishinaabe, Métis,
yeah,
and British.
yeah.
And, and the other thing is that like casting
Mm.
has often been very race specific over the years. And I've noticed that it often still is, even after the whole BLM stuff that's been going on last year. How has your heritage factored into booking roles and your heritage and so on?
Yeah, it's so weird. 'Cause, I think partly because of my childhood growing up, and partly because of the way kids, um, well, because I wasn't the blonde hair, blue eyed, sandy haired, green eyed kid growing up, I didn't always fit in because at the time when I was a kid, a lot of the people were, they were like British and Scottish and Irish. And even my dad, because my dad is mixed, he had three sisters, both were blonde hair, red hair, or sorry, blonde hair, red hair, they were all, and had freckles and light eyes. Whereas my dad looked like an Indian chief. Like even if you looked at my dad, if you put like a headdress on him, you'd be like, oh my God, yeah. Because he had that typical face look. Um, so for me growing up, again, I was very much an outcast in a lot of ways. It's because I didn't look like everybody. Maybe because I was more independent. I'm not sure what the deal was, but I kind of squashed that part of myself. Um, my dad would talk to me as I got older about my heritage, and I was always a bit afraid because we were taught that being indigenous was dirty. It was wrong. There was a lot of cultural issues, particularly when I was younger, growing up with alcoholism, drug abuse, poverty, and that's a lot of that's still a problem today. And as a kid, you don't want to be set aside from everybody. You want to be part of the group. And so I was like, Dad, I'm just Canadian. And I was able to blend very easily. Now, my dad passed a few years ago, and even he didn't have his full story. It took my son, who got into doing Indigenous law, to find out our heritage like fully. And there are still a lot of things that I would like to do with my heritage that I haven't had the opportunity to do yet. But in terms of casting, for the longest time, I was just, they would bring me in for Hispanic because I look Hispanic. They were bringing me in for Canadian because now I look like a bunch of other Canadians, and the day I didn't. And it took an audition I went to for it was a story about the children in the residential schools, and I actually went in for the role of an Irish nun. And I'm standing in the room, and the director looks at me and goes, "Are you Indigenous?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Do you have a kid?" And I'm, "Yeah, but she's too old for what you're looking for." And I ended up getting cast as the mom. And from that time on, I thought, okay, part of it is I guess I've always kind of wanted to embrace it. And my dad kind of pushed that forward later in life because I realized how much he'd lost giving up his heritage. Um, And now I feel like I'm missing a lot of it, and I'm trying to get it back. Um, find out more about I know a lot about my family, back to my great great grandfather. Um, but you know, it's been a long haul, and it's funny because there were a couple of times I got brought in for and I'm always grateful to be brought in. And I've noticed more so now I'm getting brought in for Indigenous roles, which is fantastic. But still, some of them, I'm like, you know, there was one I got brought in. I'm not going to name. I was grateful for it just to be brought in for it, but I kind of went, wow, okay, so this is a stereotypical Indigenous role, and I kind of hated myself after I went in and did it because I thought,
So when you say it was a stereotypical indigenous role, what kind of? I mean, there are so many sort of
okay, so it was
what.
a homeless woman who was Indigenous, and when I went in for the role, I brought a bottle of booze with me, right? Because that's what you envision, right? With that growing up, that's what I envisioned. And actually, if you watch any of the Indigenous shows that are on TV now still, and that deal with the reservations and deal with, there's a lot of the drug and alcohol abuse that's still a part of the picture in a big way. So that's like, for me, the ideal role would be someone who is Indigenous, but who has been successful in life, who is, you know, grew up on a reservation maybe and was able to become a lawyer and is able to go back and work with their people and work to fight to bring goodness to the life that's there, you know, or someone who's been able to become a doctor or a nurse or somebody who's, but you know, and I've been watching a lot more Indigenous television, and still, you know, I know some of it's more of like a dramatic series, so they have to throw that in because it is part of life. It is part of the reality of being on the reservation.
Yeah,
But
it's also
yeah,
part of the whole hundreds of years of
yeah,
disenfranchisement as well, the brutalization of cultures and so on. It's all a part of it. So I mean, I understand like why it can be seen as like it's a stereotype. Of course, it's part of the stereotype, but
yeah,
they can't they can't just swipe this aside and kind of make it look all yeah, everything's okay now.
yeah, exactly. You can't. You don't want to cover up the reality of the situation, which is why I think a lot of the television shows focus on that. But at the same time, there needs to be something that pushes people forward to rise above that, to
Mhm.
see if there is something above that, that you can become an artist. I know some, I've seen some amazing.
And to give hope. I mean, this is another thing that a
Yeah,
lot of. I mean, I don't pretend to be a spokesperson for
yeah,
cultures that I have, very little knowledge of, but just to give people hope, uh,
yeah, yeah,
that being just taken, just ripped
yeah.
away from them, and
Yeah.
is a part of that whole,
That is very much, and that's why, you know, so it's become a lot more. It's funny because the roles I've been brought in for recently, they've become a lot more uh, diverse in that way. I've been brought in for, I have been brought in for Hispanic before and just regular whatever, but also being brought in for Indigenous has been great because it's nice to feel a little bit more in touch with what my heritage is. You
Mhm.
know, I like to see people fighting for good and fighting to move forward and be successful, no matter what's going on around. And I think that's a world view too, right? I mean, there are lots of cultures that are suppressed that, you know, are struggling, and to see them rise above, that's what you want. So, but it's been great. Yeah, in terms of casting, I love the fact that they're now being a lot more diverse. I think I mentioned this to a casting director in a post one day, saying, I love the fact that we're pushing for more diversity. I'm hoping for the day when um, I'm brought in for the role of a lawyer who is Indigenous, not an Indigenous lawyer. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that, I'm not being brought in because I'm Indigenous. I'm being brought in because I'm an actor and I'm good enough to play this role, whether I'm Indigenous or not. And if you want to throw that into the mix, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Totally
I,
good.
it's a touchy subject because so many people are, it's weird because I was chatting and I'm part of a group, an urban indigenous group in Toronto here. And somebody basically said, because I said to them, we were talking about Métis status and status Indian, or indigenous status, but they still call it status Indian. And somebody said to me, well, you can't be Métis and indigenous. I said, well, that's my heritage. I'm both. I'm somewhere back in time, my great grandfather and his wife one was indigenous, one was French, and that's how you got the Métis in it.
Yeah.
And then their child married somebody who was an Anishinaabe, and but they're like pushing me like, okay, well you have to pick one. I'm like, why?
Why? What? How does that work? Is there is there a bylaw that says you must only pick one? You can only be one of these.
Mostly status, because I haven't applied for papers because for myself, I don't. I know there's a lot that goes with it. I really don't need a tax break. I don't need a lot of the stuff that goes with that. If I were to apply for them, it would be just for the acknowledgement that I'm out of that nation.
Yeah. And just for anybody who happens to be watching this, like who's thinking that indigenous people are, getting these amazing tax breaks and they're in the system. Because there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot. I mean, what I mean is there's a lot of people out there that actually believe that this is the case. That somehow you've got your card in order to fleece the system. It's like, no, this was something that was set up. This is one small thing out of many that was agreed upon, but one that is kind of been promised, and a promise that's been followed through. One many that have not.
Yes, it has been followed through, but there are like I didn't know this. I actually went to TIFF, not this year, obviously, but last year, and there was a film who was done by an Indigenous documentary filmmaker. She's done like 80 of them. She's in her 80s. She's fabulous, and it was telling the story of a young boy who was born in a northern community I'm not sure if it was Saskatchewan or Manitoba, and he had a whole host of physical illnesses, and he could not be taken care of at home. And in order for him to survive, they had to bring him to a hospital. And the hospital was several hours south of where they lived. So the father would have to stay home with the other children and take care of the kids while the mom visited at the hospital. And this child lived his life for 5 years in that hospital before he passed away. And all because they weren't able to get what we as Canadians would be able to get in terms of healthcare support at home so that your child could live with you. This child never had a true home because he was in a hospital bed, and they couldn't even get it sorted out to organize for him to go live in a foster home where he could be cared for, because there was different departments arguing over who would take that expense. And there was a law that was enacted or put in place because of this child. And he died before it passed. And when it passed, it still took people going to court to sue the government to get them to follow through for the other Indigenous children who were in a similar situation. So I didn't even know that they weren't entitled to a lot of the stuff that we Canadians are like. When my father was sick, if he wanted to be at home, he could have proper nursing care. I know people who have a child who has severe MS, muscular dystrophy, and he has nursing. He has a proper van that's been set up. He has a hospital bed given to him, and the mom can work because they have nursing to cover the child. So what the people have been given, yes, but there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been given and isn't available.
Like drinkable water.
Homes with insulation that aren't plywood. Like my son, who worked on the reservations, he says, some are very wealthy. They've been able to, find a way of putting a business together, if it's a gambling business or whatever, to raise up the community. But there's still a lot that don't have, and that's where you have a lot of the social problems coming into play. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to be the one to say I'm an expert on it because, again, I'm just trying to get myself to reach out
Yeah.
and
I mean,
back to
just
it.
a couple of people that live in Canada that know little bits and pieces, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, I can only talk from like what I've read, and I've got a friend who, she's a manager at a hospital, and she's a nurse as well, fully qualified nurse. And before she started at the hospital, she had to fly out to,
mm,
um, I think it was somewhere in northern Ontario. She had to take two planes. So she had to
yeah,
fly to Timmins, and then she had to take a like one of those tiny little scary planes where you can fit like six people to go
yeah,
to this community.
yeah,
And she said it
yeah,
was it's really really sad. Like
yeah,
they're
yeah, it is.
franchise that there's no hope there.
Yeah,
Um, and I hate to say it, but in Canada we have this reputation of being a first world country, but
mm.
we have our own third world right on the doorstep
Well,
there.
we absolutely do. Yeah, and that's why I've said all along, I'm always more than welcome to say come in to newcomers from anywhere in the world, especially if they're in need. But we also need to take a good look at what is happening here at home too.
Yeah,
Um, that's great. You want to take in refugees from everywhere, absolutely. I think that we have the space. We're welcoming people. We're a melting pot of people. You can be who you want here, for the most part. But at the same time, you need to really look at where you're lacking in in Canadian life. And there are a lot of people like our elderly too, are like, I mean, this is coming from a nursing standpoint.
right.
Our elderly too are getting, and it's not just COVID. I saw this like 5 years ago with my dad, and he was in a home for probably 8 months, and the conditions were horrendous. And when my mother-in-law got sick and had dementia, my husband and I and my sister-in-law, we got together, and I said, she's not going into a home. I said, we're going to have to do something with nursing care for her in her home, because I don't care how much it costs us. It's not worth it to have her in a place where she gets little to no care. And having seen it with my dad, I thought I will never ever let that happen to somebody else that I know and love. So I think we spent somewhere close to 80,000 in about a year and a half taking care of her. We had round the clock nursing because she was a dementia patient, and blew through my father-in-law's savings. My husband would pay for the weekend nurses. It was hard, and I mean, for a country that can afford to help people along for 8 months if they're on COVID relief and not able to work. They obviously have some resources. I know that we're probably in debt up to our eyeballs, but at least look at where your actual gaps in care are, and where the population really needs to help. Even homeless, homeless people on the street in Toronto, in the dead of winter, it's brutal.
And Vancouver as well. Like the
Yeah, oh yeah, Vancouver. I mean, if you go on Hastings Street, it's like, oh
yeah.
my God. Yeah, we walked out. We were, I don't know if I want to say bad. We went to Vancouver in August for a week, my husband and I. At the time, we were out of state. We were into just wearing masks and going shopping. And Vancouver wasn't a mask mandated place, but we wore it. And whenever we were in crowds and going through the hotels and stuff, and just walking along Hastings Street, it was
It's
horrible.
like something else. I
Yeah,
got you can't imagine something like that
I
in a
know.
whole country. But I mean,
Yeah,
the first time. I mean, sure, you do see homelessness
yeah,
happening on the streets of Toronto, but
yeah,
Vancouver, like you said, Hastings Street, right?
yeah, yeah,
I've never seen anything like that before. Like I've lived in cities
yeah,
my life. Like I lived all over the UK, and just this was the first time I ever saw anything like this, where you have pretty much permanent tent cities all
yeah,
down the street, and people wandering around with huge like carts with bits
yeah,
and pieces of like I don't know like car parts. I don't know what they
yeah,
were, but like going around and you know as a a white middle class dude, you know, with a wallet, just like walking down the street thinking, "Oh my God, are we going to be killed?" Like,
Yeah.
because
So
it goes through your mind because you're not used to this
that's
kind
right.
of Mad Max scenario.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's crazy because so the first time I'd ever been to Vancouver was not this year, but it was the year before. A friend of mine, this sounds really terrible. We went there to see a concert. I know that sounds weird. I had bought the tickets for $20 online, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to this concert." And then my husband was going to come with me, but he couldn't take the time. So a friend of mine went, and we were doing a boat tour, and we got off over. They have this building. It's like the Science Center, or Epcot Center, or something. And we got out, and we were walking through Chinatown, and we just started walking along, and we didn't know where we were going. We were walking along Hastings Street, and I'm going, oh. And then we just kept walking, and we walked straight through because we were on our way back to approximately where we were staying, gas town. And I'm just looking, and I'm going, this is. I was not so much scared, but sad. It was.
Yeah,
You know, the guy there whose leg looks like it's going to fall off because he's got a major infection, and then the woman who's asleep with her face against the telephone pole, or I don't know, it's just
yeah,
I I just thought there is just so much need here,
yeah,
it's just.
yeah. That
But we
like
have a pretty impressive tent city here too now. I don't know if you've been down by Sherborne, over by the hockey arena there. That's a pretty impressive tent city because I drove by it about a month ago, I think. And I mean, and people are talking about, well, get them out of the park, get them out. Well, where else are they going to go? They deserve to be in a place that they can stay that's at least warm and can protect them from the elements. Like, what are you going to do, right? Um, unless there's something in place to give them a home or somewhere that they can go to keep themselves safe. How can you tear down the only place that they can stay? So
yeah, and really like I think a lot of it has been highlighted over the past year as well, right? Because
sure.
you
Yeah,
know we've become like quite often we'll walk past people on the
yeah,
way to work or whatever, right,
yeah,
and ask them for change, and a lot of us will kind of just walk past and
yeah,
not see them or
yeah,
choose
yeah,
not to see those people.
yeah,
Now we're at home.
yeah, yeah.
These
I,
are unhoused people that don't have a home, and
yeah.
they're in the same amount of danger, if not more, now than
Oh,
they.
for sure. Yeah, COVID has really. I know a lot of people who were. I'm part of a group called Caremongers who people post, I just got an apartment. I don't have any gifts for my kids for Christmas. I just like something small that I could give them. Does anybody have? Or, I can't get out of my house. I'm on disability. I have like $2 left on my Presto card, and I need to go get cat food. Um, and somebody else in the group will step up and say, how much cat food do you need? What kind do you need? And I'll send it to you. And
What's the name of the group?
it's called caremongering. It's become a big thing, actually. Apparently, it's now international, but a casting director in Toronto introduced me to it. And, I can't do everything all the time, but I have adult children. So this year I said, okay, for me for Christmas, I want you to each buy a gift. I'm going to adopt a family it's a woman who had just moved into a new, I guess it's Ontario housing, a new apartment for her and her kids. And she said, I don't have any Christmas decorations. I'm just asking if anybody has extra Christmas decorations and maybe, something that a gift that I could give. And I said to her, let me know what your kids want. And I gave each of my kids something to buy for each kid. And so kids each got 2 gifts, I think. And then I didn't do anything but decorations, but I brought them like a gingerbread house or something that, so that they could.
That's a
But
great thing to do. That's a great thing. And I wanted to ask you, like, because you've, like I said earlier when I introduced you, you've done several other things other than acting. I mean, okay, like most actors, they do other little jobs,
in Toronto,
stuff,
yeah.
and they say, okay, this is not my job. This is how I earn. I think this was Chris Show said like to you last week. She said, this is not my job. This is just what I do to get money. But my
Exactly.
job is being an actor. But
Yeah.
for you, I think you've had other careers in the past, right? You were a nurse. That's
Yeah,
not just a job. That was something you were. And I think that
yeah,
that's informed the way you are, or rather, because of the kind of person you are, that's
yeah.
why you became a nurse, right? It takes a certain time to become a nurse. So how have these other careers, like the nurse, and you worked in computer technology as well?
I do. That's my make money job. I do it half time now for the school board.
So
Um,
how have these earlier lives
yeah.
affected how you bring what do you bring into your acting is what I'm trying to say, but not very
Um,
eloquently.
the nursing is a big thing because it's funny. You would think nursing would actually help you, and it does in some ways because sometimes they'll ask for you to come out as a nurse to play a role of a nurse because it makes sense, and it teaches you a certain amount of empathy and the ability to step in and understand how other people are feeling because you see them their reactions in a bad situation and all of that. It also is unhelpful in a way because if you're doing it long enough, you have to learn to distance yourself from that emotion of feeling sorry for someone who has lost a family member. Because as human beings, our automatic instinct is to protect ourselves. And that's actually the opposite of what an actor needs to do. The actor needs to do, hey, world, I'm here. Um, I'm going to cry for you because this is sad and I'm going to, but we're taught not to cry and we're taught to be strong and we're taught
Yeah,
to get over it and deal with it.
deal with
So
it, leave it at the door before you go home. Yeah,
yeah, and not people in general are taught that growing up as a child, don't cry.
yeah,
Um, but nursing is even more so because when you're walking into a room and you're cleaning, I've done this before, this is why I'm saying it, you're cleaning out the pelvis of a man who was crushed in a mining accident, and he seems chipper and friendly and so nice, and you've been told before you walk in this man's probably going to die because he's septic. And how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with and I've held the hands of a few people as they've passed away and they've been family members. So, you know, how do you do that without bawling your eyes out and going home? I did a lot of home care in the beginning, and one of my patients was a wealthy woman who had brain tumor and had had surgery. Husband passed away, and it was so hard when she got worse, and she wasn't 100% there all the time anyway, but just to watch her family suffer and and it was hard too because I was like, they had let me not let me go, but they had put me on the back burner because nursing care is very expensive. So I was there with her while she was recovering, and then her husband passed away, and I was there while she was going through all of that. But when she became less mobile, more bedridden, they decided to have healthcare people come in. So I didn't see her for a few months, and then when she became a heavier patient again, and meds had to be given, all that, I was brought back in. And I was only doing 1 or 2 days a week, and it was only an 8-hour shift. And when they called me to ask me to come back, my heart went right because I got to know the family. And then they called me one day and said, "Can you come in today?" And I wasn't even supposed to work that day, and I said, "Sure, sure, no problem." And all through it, I was thinking, there's no way she's going to pass away on my shift. I'm only doing 1 8-hour shift out of like 3 a day over 7 days a week. And sure enough, I walked in. They said, "Yeah, something's going on with her, and we think she blew an aneurysm in her leg." And she was slowly bleeding out. So I knew that she was going to go on my shift, and that was so hard. And that's why being an actor too, because I knew at the end of my nursing education that I don't know if I can handle this, like, because just emotionally, but even like going into class and studying, I like one of the teachers that I work with, he said to me, "It's because you're a nurse. You're having trouble getting in touch with that because you're a nurse, because your instinct is to like I don't want to know. I don't want to be part of that, right?" So
that I was going to ask about that. Like, I was going to ask, does it make it easier that you have all of these things, all of these events, these really highly emotional events that you can then tap into to get the emotion. And yet it sounds like what you're saying is it's the opposite. It's harder because you've put up that wall to protect yourself.
Yeah, it takes a very long time to break down that wall. I think I've gotten to that point. Um, it was funny because when my mom passed away, was it my dad? I can't remember. I was pretty stoic through the whole thing. Um, I knew he was going to go. I had to come to terms with it. It's so funny because I even said to my husband when my mom was passing away, my mom was very young. It was traumatic to me because she was 59 and I was like still in my like 30s. My kids were little, and I knew 3 years before she was going to pass away that it was going to happen because she had terminal lung cancer.
Mhm.
And I said to my husband one day, like I was sitting on the computer, I was doing something, and he had gone to bed, and I had bawled my eyes out that night. And then the
Sure.
next day, I got up and I said to my husband, I have to plan for this. I have to do because I know it's going to happen. He's like, don't talk like that. I was like, I have to because I know it's going to happen. And same with my dad. And someone said to me after, like, we were, I don't remember what we were at some kind of a memorial for him, and I was finally crying. And they said to me, wow, it's the first time I've seen you cry. And even with my mother-in-law, like, and it broke my heart with my mother-in-law. And I, you know, I'm, we're taught to be strong, right? Especially if you're a nurse, you have to be strong. You can't take that home with you because it will just devastate you. So in a way, it's a blessing because it gives you a vantage point as an actor to see people's reactions to situations and know, yeah, that's how I would react in that situation. But at the same time, it's hard because it builds a wall that you have to break down. And I didn't really nurse for that long. Um, but in the time that I did, the places that I worked, it was hard. I mean, I did some at the time. The education system has totally changed for nursing, and I was in a step down unit in a psych ward where we've had people who were schizophrenic who had tried to kill family members, had tried to kill themselves. Step down units in medical work, like with the patient I was telling you about, the gentleman who was going to pass away, cared for an elderly Italian woman who I could really identify with. And, she had been in a bed for like a month or two from something that had happened. And then, I walked to come into work one day and go, oh my God, she's walking the hallway. That's such an amazing feeling. And that was the thing that I loved about nursing, but it was the pain in the pit of my stomach every time I had to go into work that said, I can't do this. Yeah, it's taken me a while to open up as an actor because of it. Um, but now I can appreciate it for what it is. Like it's a protective instinct, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if somebody gets, I've been diagnosed with cancer. So when we get diagnosed with cancer, you'll have the people who are like, "What can I do? I'm here for you. I will help you. Can I do this?" And then you'll have the people who are like, disappear or don't acknowledge that it's happened because
Yeah.
that happened on both ends. And you find out, and it's funny because people say when you're really sick, that's when you find out who your real friends are, and it's kind of true.
Yeah. Yeah, it is true. I mean, I had, I mean, this isn't about me. That we want to know about you, but just in passing, my mother died of cancer last year. So apart from that, 2020 was fine for me. But that that was sucked. That really sucked because my family knew that this was happening, and it was taking a very long time because she was a very, very tough, very stoic.
It's a very hard thing. Yeah.
And like herself, like she was like, okay, this is
Yeah.
how it is, and she was very organized. So it was like, and she's dying, and it's like, okay, so this is what's going to happen, and,
Yeah.
and we're like, what the hell, and
Yeah.
um, so it kind of, I mean, it made it a lot easier for the rest of us because she was like very matter of fact about it. And it's like, well, when it happens, blah, blah, blah. And so it really made us realize how giving she was because she wasn't thinking about her demise and that moment that was inevitable within the next few months. It was like, she was thinking about all the other people and how it would affect them and making sure that they were okay. So
Yeah.
that kind of, it made it easier for us, but in another way, it kind of made us miss her a lot more. So
Yeah.
It kind of
I hear you. Believe me, I hear you because it's funny when I was first diagnosed with the cancer I had. Generally has a 65% fatality rate after 5 years.
But when were you diagnosed?
I had a tumor in my tongue, and they
Your tongue.
uh,
You
and
you still have it, or you had it?
I had it. So what they did was they removed a third to a half of my tongue and rebuilt it with
This is the real story. Like, you're an actor.
yes,
Your voice, your voice is basically
yeah,
your job.
yeah, my life, yeah, I know.
Tumor
I,
in your tongue, a cancerous tumor
yeah,
removed,
yeah,
and 2/3 of your. Sorry, how much of your tongue did you say?
a third to half. So it's a little, it's between that. And they rebuilt it with skin from my wrist. So I have a fabulous scar here. I don't
Oh
know.
wow!
Yeah, there we go. And if I can twist it another way. But anyways, it's this
Yeah.
big scar. And most people who have had have a heavy lisp. I had an amazing plastic surgeon. I had an amazing surgeon who actually I said to him when I'm signing the papers, I'm like, dude, I'm an actor. And one of the ways that they can go in to get it is to cut your chin like this. And I said to him, I'm gonna let you do it if you have to, but don't do it just because it's fastest and easiest. I want you to do it because you have to.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to get all the cancer. So God bless him. I was in surgery for 14 hours. He removed it. They rebuilt it. They took all of these lymph nodes from my neck. And after radiation and chemo, I am 10 years out. So I'm very blessed. But I've had a lot of experiences with cancer, my mom being the first. And my son's girlfriend 2 years ago was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, which is normally terminal. But the way it grew for her, she is now cancer free. God bless her. She's like one of those 5% who managed to get through it. And so there's been a lot of cancer in my life. Um, and again, that everything that we experience as individuals kind of feeds us as an actor because you carry that with you, and it's like, yeah, like it's just like saying, talking about the man now as I talk about the man and who had the sepsis, I will tear up thinking about it, whereas before I wouldn't. And remembering my dad on his last day or my mom. But it's so funny because when I was diagnosed with cancer, I have two dogs. So one of them, if my doorbell rings, you'll hear them. But when at the time I only had one dog, and I thought, okay, well, if I die, the plus is I won't be around to see my dog die. So I'm like this, and now he's like 17 and a half. And I was afraid to take him to the vet yesterday because I thought, oh my God, what if they tell me I have to put him down? But it was nothing. He has a bladder infection. but
The thing, it doesn't matter. Like, people who don't own pets,
yeah.
we won't get this. But this is the thing: when a pet dies, it it's really really. I mean, we've got a lot of pets. We've got like two aquatic frogs. We got tropical fish, a snail, two
Yeah.
cats, and three chickens. Now, we had four chickens, and one of them died a few months back. It was so sad, but like, I think for me, like as soon as it died, like my wall went up, and my wife Anne was so upset. She was like in tears, and she was like, "Oh my God, I think she's just died. Can you check that she's dead?" And I kind of looked at her like, "What? What do you mean? Check she's dead?" So I just kind of like poked it.
Oh, beautiful. I don't know.
But yeah, incredibly sad. So anyway, get it. Yeah, Lisa Kovac. Do you know Lisa?
I know, Lisa. Hi. Hi, Lisa. You're
Yeah,
shining today.
Lisa says you are one brave and amazing lady.
I'm here. She's amazing. She's my reading partner. If she gets called for an audition, I'll read for her. She'll read for me. Sometimes if it's something last minute, I remember I made a call to her about 2 months ago. Oh my God, I have to get this in like today because it's due tomorrow and I have to work. So, but she's amazing. She's fabulous in and of herself. I mean, she's raised three kids and she's traveled all over the world, and she loves to do theater and stuff. So she's a terrific actress too. She's
Awesome.
amazing.
Um, so I've learned a lot about you, but I want to know about what you've been up to in classes, because you said you've been doing you've been doing some workshops and so on
Yeah,
recently.
yeah, I'm like nuts. You know what? I decided I used to do a lot of indie stuff way back. I still do a lot of indie stuff. I used to do a lot of indie stuff, and I get cast, I work it, and whatever. And then one day I thought, well, okay, if I want to progress, maybe I mean, I studied when I was younger, when I was in school, when I was in nursing school. I took a few acting courses as well through the college, but I never truly went for like actual formal education. And aside from signing up at a theater and film program at Ryerson or whatever, which I probably could have done, I thought, well, I'm going to start studying. So I talked to my agent, and he gave me a list of schools that are top schools in Toronto. And I have been studying with a couple of them one for about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. I'm always taking a class there. And then the other one I kind of got into about a year and a half ago, and I've been taking classes with them, working with individual coaches. But it was like a smorgasbord when Zoom classes came out, because then I started thinking, okay, look, I'm free Monday to Friday. Let me do something in the daytime. So I would sign up for commercial voice classes. I did. I always had at least 2 other classes going on, but then there was one week I found myself with 4 things, and I was like, okay, this is a bit much. So I try to always have a couple things going on. So yes, I've been studying with a couple of coaches, and this makes it so much easier. I even did Second City online, but I've done Second City before. I did all my improv at Second City Toronto.
You did improv. What was that like? Because I've thought about doing some improv.
Oh my God, improv is like, it's like terrifying, but fun as hell. So
Yeah.
when I first started doing, because you're an actor, you're used to working with the script and some kind of idea what your character is. And then basically they throw you 3 words and you have to figure out what to do. But it is fun as hell. I got heavily into it. I took all the levels, and then I got up to advanced improv, and I did that for 2 sessions. And then they didn't have anybody to teach the advanced improv
Yeah,
class.
right. I mean, like I heard that like improv can really help in your
Oh my
other.
God. Yeah, it's amazing. Improv helps you a lot with commercial stuff, but even if you're on set and things aren't working out, it gives you an opportunity to say, let me see if I can try this. And it actually gives you more of I'm a little bit of a shy person, and I was always a little bit nervous because I felt um, that if you don't have that big degree behind your name, that you don't know what you're doing. Um,
If you haven't been to RADA, then you're nobody.
then you'll know better. That's right. If you haven't, So, but so this actually makes you a little bit more ballsy in a way, because you're like, yeah, I got that. I can do this. It makes you more outgoing. And I loved it. I mean, I loved it. So and I've missed it. And I was actually seriously considering getting back into it, like going for just even a couple of courses in the summer at Second City, but then COVID hit. So I studied Second City online in Chicago and in LA with their coaches, because it was available over Zoom, which is fabulous. I'm like, where else can I study today? It's a bit of an addiction, I have to be honest.
Awesome. So I've never done. I've been to see a friend doing it, like giving a live show,
Yeah.
and um, hopefully he's not watching. But the stuff that I saw was pretty dire. But
Yeah.
I think there are different levels that you
There
can.
most definitely is. Okay, so they'll have a showcase on Mondays. If you're in class, you can drop in and play. That gives you an opportunity to do more of it. But if you're looking for true, so most improv that's like in Toronto, like at Second City, for example, if you were to go to the main stage and watch it, it's a scripted improv. So the only actual true improv you'll get is when they'll come out and say, I'm going to get 3 things from the audience. Give me a place, a thing, and a relationship. And then you get out there and you play that. I've seen it done fantastically well. Um, I was in Los Angeles last year in December, and I said to my husband, "We're going to Second City here. I want the year before we gone to the comedy club, but I wanted to go to Second City." And we took a musical improv. Musical improv is not my thing, I have to say. I admire anybody who can do it because I can sing, but I'm not great. And whenever they would always have an improv musical teacher come in for one session during our classes, and I would be like, "Oh, I hate this." Um, yeah, because they make you come up with a song on the spot, right? So
Wow. That's terrifying.
it is terrifying. I'm like, oh my, like they're like, for example, if you're saying, "Look, the sky is blue," and someone looks at you and says, "That sounds like a song," you have to go, "Shit." Okay, and then you have to come up with this song about, blue skies or "that sky is blue," and it's. I'm like, ah, but my husband and I saw this at Second City, so it was a musical improv show, and I think the troupe performed once or twice a month. They were phenomenal and hysterically funny. They were so good. So there are always different levels. Like I'll sit and I'll watch a show at, say, we have a couple of places here, and I went to one show and it was like, yeah, it was all right. And then, but it depends on how it clicks that night, and how adept the performer is, right? So
Yeah.
it is
Also,
fun.
like you say, how they work together, how well they know each other and can read each other's cues.
Yeah, it is fun but terrifying. In the beginning, it was like I would be like, because it was a Monday that I was doing classes, I'd be like, "Oh my god, I've got improv tonight!" Oh shit! So I was like, "Yes, I love it because it's so much fun," but at the same time, oh shit, I'm so bad at it. But you get better at it. And now it's like some of the I do workshops. Like I'll drop into TAP, which is Toronto Actor. Oh God, can't remember. TAP is it's a drop-in, so basically you pay like $10 and you come in. They're doing it via Zoom now, but I would drop in, and at the beginning of TAP we would do some handoffs. And doing improv on Zoom is bizarre, but it's fun too. It's just an added element of torment. So, but so much fun. But yeah, that's
You can check it out. You convinced me.
yeah. I was dying to do classes, so I mean, like I said, this past summer has been amazing, and now I'm signed up and I'm doing an online class on Mondays, and starting next week, I'm back in the studio on Wednesdays for a class as well. But we'll see. I want to do some voice work too. That's a big thing for me now. I said to my agent, I want to get into doing voice, and he was like, so, um, so if I have to come up with a demo and do all that, and working on
Hey,
accents.
if you need any accent work,
Yeah, I
yeah.
know, right? I know the guy.
So what accents do you do already? I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you to give me examples, but
Yeah.
what kinds of stuff have you done before? You said you've been in Hispanic roles and so on.
Yeah, don't even ask me to do Hispanic. So this is just for fun. Well, sorry, I got called to do an audition for a Hispanic. You never get enough information sometimes with auditions. So it was
Yeah.
for a big American television show, but it was being shot in Montreal, and it was an older Hispanic woman. But they didn't want her to be like, the older, like 60s type, even though she was a grandmother, she was a young grandmother, I think is what they
Mhm.
want me to do.
So not like a typical nonna in like a black sort of.
No, nothing like that. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. So I'm like, okay, but they didn't specify if I needed an accent for it. And so I did get in touch with the voice coach to work with it, but it was really hard. I'm more of a parrot learner. I'm
Yeah.
not like if I sit and I watch, a British show all day long, at the end of that day, I can do a British accent, which by the way is in my wheelhouse because my stepfather growing up was British
Yeah.
later in life.
So you
And
with it.
best
Yeah.
was British. My grandfather was British, so that's my wheelhouse. I can do a Southern accent. I'm always that's the thing, and maybe it's because I don't have the education behind me, but I'm always like kind of embarrassed to do it, and just because I'm like, am I doing it right? Do I sound good?
And
Um,
that I know. I mean, it's horrible when somebody says, "Oh, okay, yeah, do a such and such accent." It's like, whoa, hang on a minute. It's like I said that I do accents. I didn't say it was a freaking party trick, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I'm not. So for me,
Yeah.
I did the British accent all my life. So I would like to add to my wheelhouse, like there is an indigenous accent. Somebody said to me, "There's," I'm like, I don't know if it's an accent, it's a way of talking. And I think it's particular to like where you come from and what your actual, like what your language is. So I'm
Exactly.
that I would try and put that out there. And
Yeah.
unless it specifically says Hispanic, and then I go into a panic and I'm like, oh my God, I need to get someone to come in and work with me. But again, it's how I learn too, right? Because you can give me the information on a page and tell me this is how it's supposed to be pronounced. But if you read it to me, I can duplicate what you just did instead
Yeah.
of trying to duplicate it off a piece of paper.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think that is true for most people anyway.
Yeah,
Like they're better at picking it up through hearing it and
yeah,
then repeating it and hearing themselves do it and then fine tuning it over
yeah,
time.
exactly. Yeah,
But
because now if you ask me to do those two accents, I can probably do them like somewhat embarrassed, but off the top of my head.
oh,
Other
all right.
stuff I probably have to work on.
But and this is the thing, like when you're doing it for your work,
Yeah,
you get paid for it, right? So
yeah,
like you're at a party, it's like, oh, go on, do the accent. It's like, you're gonna pay me? Like
yeah,
pay me $50. I'll come back in 5 minutes and I'll do it
yeah.
on there.
It's
You
really funny because right now I'm living with a Brit, my daughter's fiance, who has moved in with us because of COVID. He's from Cambridge and he's only been here for 2 years. So he's got like a really heavy accent. So, when I would normally walk around the house, if I was just fooling around, I'd be, "Woo!" I'm like, now I'm like, I'm not going to do that because I feel like I'm mocking him in some way. So I don't, but
we can take it. We can take it. Like I went through that for years. Like I worked at a school teaching English, and a lot of other teachers they would call me Mark.
yeah,
Oh, hello, Mark. I'm like, if I called you this and in your accent, okay, it wouldn't really work because everybody talks like that here. But it,
yeah.
it's like you realize it's kind of a little bit.
Yeah, and that's why I try not to do. Like, I'm not trying to mock you, but it's funny because, like, again, I lived with my mom's. I was 9 when my parents split, so I think I was like 12 when my stepdad came into the picture, and so I lived with him for many years. So I could do a proper British accent, but it's more of a proper. It's not a Cockney or a. We were in. I think we were in Jamaica last year, and the gentleman was like a hard Londoner accent. I'm like, wow, like totally different sound. Mine is more.
A real kind of EastEnder vibe.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, he's like the chimney sweep guys, and it was in Mary Poppins.
That's the one they call Cockney, right? But you call, this is the thing. It's like everybody outside of London calls Londoners Cockneys, but anyone who's not from the East End isn't really,
Yeah,
strictly speaking, a Cockney. So of them get really upset about it. My wife's from Southeast London, and I say, "Oh, you're a Cockney," and she'll be like, "No, I'm from Southeast London. We're much better."
yeah.
Yeah. So
It's great. Like his mom is like a proper British lady, and like I said, they're from Cambridge. So
English, that's why they make the dictionaries, right?
yeah, she's just like she's amazing, and he is. I mean, too. He doesn't have like a heavy. He has a British accent, but it's not like a super heavy.
Like an RP.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun because I like I said, I did do a little bit of studying with that, and that was kind of fun too because it gave me uh, like after doing about half an hour with it, I could kind of play with what I was working on. And but now, if you asked me, I couldn't remember it, so I'd have to refresh myself before going in to do an audition.
It's getting that, like slipping into the state of mind, into the
Yeah,
moment, so
yeah,
that you're in the character. And this is the other thing. It's like, it's not about, like, a lot of actors don't. Some get it and some don't get it. That it's like it's not about doing your character, learning your lines, and then kind of putting a layer of accent over the top of it. It's part.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
part of that
Well,
character.
and that's the thing. I prefer to actually learn it. When I'm learning it, I want to memorize it with the accent in place because um, trying to do it after the fact is just not very efficient for me.
Yeah.
It's hard as hell because So sometimes I'll pull out the accents in class if I'm working on something, because some of my classes, it may only be 2 pages. So I'm like, okay, why don't I throw an accent in and work with it on that, at least to give myself, see how it feels. And because the class is a safe place to play. But, I haven't, like, today, actually, it's funny because the audition I had before I got on with you, um, they didn't ask me, but they asked the other person for a British accent. And I'm like, okay, kind of an on the spot thing. Now, my character wasn't British, so it was okay, but it was like, yeah, it does happen. I went in for an audition with, I think Stephanie Gorin a couple of years ago. It was her casting assistant who was in. But when I got the breakdown, it was the woman lives in, I don't know, somewhere south in Georgia or whatever, and she was indigenous. And I said, well, do you want it with a Southern accent? Because the assumption would be, even if she's indigenous, she's living in the South. She'd probably have a Southern accent. Okay, I give it to us both ways. But I knew going in, on the spot, it's a little bit harder. It depends on the accent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The information that's in the breakdown and everything as well, right?
Yeah. Please give me that information. Don't not give it to me.
Usually not much.
To manufacture or create a character, like if you're, for example, in a pilot and this person is so and so, and you say, well, can I give her an accent just to maybe round her out as a character? But depends on where it's coming from, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where did what is the writer's vision, the director's vision put together with all of that, and where do they feel that, like, where is her background from?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes those things they don't have a solid background. They give you an outline of what the character is, and then you can maybe build something around it yourself, or over time you build it, right? But some of that has to be introduced at the beginning stages. So.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the time because I think you said you've got another class to go to or something.
No, I have a table read for a pilot that's shooting. So
oh, cool.
I think they're actually
which I really appreciate, but I don't want you to be too late.
Yeah.
So, Cheryl, thank you so much for coming and talking to me. It was such a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll be catching up with you later, another time. Okay.
Yeah, I'll definitely be looking forward to giving you a call next time I get an accent role.
Absolutely. Give me a call and we'll sort something out.
You take care. Have a great day. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.